Hey guys, my name is Mysca and welcome to Overwatch Central, and we're taking a look at the patch notes from last night on the PTR. There's been quite a lot of changes and we didn't cover them in our videos last night, but we covered a lot of other things and a lot of other testing. And with me here to talk about the patch notes is Ryan actually as well.
Hello. We were going to talk a little bit in more detail about Baptiste, but playing him on the PTR with like the
no limits,
the sort of certain game modes in it was a mess. So we are going to try and set up actual like pick up groups to be able to play it properly, work out what works, what doesn't. But
yes,
as Mysca said, we have so much here to highlight, and there's specific things that you've seen from the thumbnail that actually took us by surprise when trying stuff out. I think the main change that we want to go over straight away, which this has to do with, is the armor changes. To sort of quickly go onto them, beam type damage is now reduced by 20% when hitting armor, and damage over time effects are no longer mitigated by armor. So examples of this, I think the only examples are Widowmaker's Venom Mine and Ash's Dynamite. But the main thing is how this affects the beam type of damage, such as Symmetra, Zarya, and so forth. But Winston has a really weird interaction that increases his damage quite a lot.
Yeah, so this was one thing that we weren't sure about. So we read this, and this is right at the top, so we're going from top to bottom here. And straight away, I asked the question, like, is this actually affect, like, which of these actually affect Winston? Is it the damage over time, or is it the beam type? And it would make sense for it to just be the beam type, but we wanted to try it out. So we got some interesting results, and in the footage here, you can see me first here trying out 50 of 100 on Winston's mag here for the Tesla cannon, and on the live client you would deal 75 damage with this. So the full clip on normal health would be 300, half of that would be 150, and then half of the clip would be 75. So we deal 75 damage on the main client. Now with the exact same amount of ammo on the PTR, we deal 120 damage. That's 45 extra damage, which is about a 60% increase or so, which is pretty dang good. That is very good news for Winston players, especially since, yeah, it was kind of hard to see where they were taking all of this. But they had hinted at this in the past. I believe Jeff Goodman had mentioned that these types of changes were coming, but that's how that works now. And the damage over time effects are no longer mitigated by armor. As Ryan said, only really affects Ash's Dynamite and the Venom Mine. I don't think there's anything else at least. So yeah, that was pretty interesting.
I think it's a really big buff to the Dynamite now that I think about it, really, where it's, you know, Ash is really good against goats, and a lot of stuff comes back to trying to counter the triple tank, triple support. This could be a big change to her, but that's the kind of like main thing that we spotted that nobody else has, I guess, has quite worked out yet. But going quickly over the other patch notes, like literally a third of the heroes in the game are in these patch notes now, so we do have to quickly go through them. Damage boost is now applied to a projectile when it's fired, rather than when it hits a target. This is just a quality of life thing, doesn't increase anything majorly. It was a bit bugged when we tested it on a PTR with how it stacks with supercharger and stuff, but hopefully that gets fixed because that clearly shouldn't be happening. Knockback distance is a lot more consistent, both knocking targets like a Mercy that's trying to res, which was a big complaint from the pros, that they were booping away a ulting Falcon Mercy while she was trying to res a target. Realistically, they should have been knocked away. They weren't because of how this works, so should alleviate a lot of frustrations. Both of these changes should alleviate a lot of frustrations. But now we get onto Ana with kind of a nerf, but not a really big one.
Yeah, so Ana was changed. Her Nano Boost was, her heal on the Nano Boost was reduced from 300 to 250, which isn't a huge deal. But I think it's good to just see that they're kind of taking a pass on all of the different heroes, as we're going to see just throughout these patch notes. As it's not just about addressing the main concern right then and there, but also just in general taking these balance patches as an overall look at the game and just balance as a whole, and seeing how they can kind of mix up the meta and feel of it a bit. So I'm glad to see these types of changes still. Doomfist as well. I'm sure people, Doomfist mains in particular, will be really happy to see that the Rising Uppercut cooldown was reduced from 7 to 6 seconds, and the Seismic Slam cooldown was also reduced from 7 to 6 seconds. And that extra, or well, that reduced second there is gonna be felt a whole lot more in Doomfist than a whole lot of other heroes, because so much of his kit just revolves around that rhythm of using the abilities and around that sort of gameplay loop of Doomfist. And on top of that, you have the passive synergizing with that and a lot of other things, which just really helps the character out. So I was really happy to see that one too. There's quite a lot of other interesting changes here as well. Yeah, Ryan, if you want to go on from Hanzo.
Definitely. I think there's some really interesting stuff with like Hanzo Widow especially. Sonic Arrow, the detection radius increased from 7 to 9 meters as the dev comments go over. This is basically because some environments or maps are really dense that the Sonic Arrow just doesn't work because it hits so many walls. But scrolling all the way down to the bottom with the other sniper involved. I quickly wanted to highlight the Widowmaker changes here too, because they are very similar. Widowmaker's Infrasight actually now reveals enemy health bars, which is probably one of the bigger changes in the patch notes. But it does have a caveat. It now cancels when you die, so I'm really excited to see how this affects pro Widowmakers, how much more aggressively they play with Infrasight when they have it up, that they can see all of the enemy health bars, which targets are low, but they do run the risk of, losing that effect, not only for themselves, but the rest of their team if they die, so quite interested to see if a Widowmaker becomes more or less aggressive, depending on when they have their ultimate up.
Yeah, and on top of that, of course, the whole double sniper thing being a little bit more relevant overall because of Baptiste. Like amplification matrix, for example, you can play a whole lot more range. Finally, we might actually see a bit of a shift in meta because of all of this. So yeah, hopefully we see that go somewhere. Speaking of which, we got McCree, another one of those types of heroes. You got Found the Hammer, damage reduced from 55 to 50. Deadeye, damage per second increased from 275 to 550 after locking onto targets for 2.5 seconds. So the Found the Hammer change is pretty straightforward. We don't really need to talk about it. It's been nerfed by 5 damage. It's not really that big of a deal. That's 5 damage per bullet as well, right? So yeah, obviously like something to keep in mind. But the Deadeye is interesting because it means that if you have someone that's, say, over 600 HP, so 275 per second, right, and you have 2.5 seconds, so about over 600 or so HP, you're going to be locking onto them a lot faster after that, at 550, which is double the rate. So if you have a Wrecking Ball at like 1100 HP, you'll be locking onto him a whole lot faster now compared to before. And I think it's good to see this type of change a bit preemptively, almost, but and also just to try and counter goats a bit more, but I don't really know if it's going to be enough.
It does kind of stack awkwardly with Amplification Matrix. We made a video going over all of the weird interactions. It should be at the top right of your screen if you're watching this, but yeah, McCree, again, is really good in those bunker comps, right, fighting from a distance, so having Deadeye here in these situations might be quite useful. Another really interesting change I wanted to highlight was Mei, the Endothermic Blaster, her primary fire damage of her freezing targets. The damage was increased from 45 to 55 damage per second, with her Ice Wall having the health reduced from 500 to 400, so kind of a give and take change.
Yeah, that's per pillar on the Mei wall too, which is obviously important to point out, but I think this is still a good thing to see. I'm not sure how much it's going to do for and against Mei, but I like it. I like seeing tweaks there, I guess. It's a change.
I think pros have definitely been toying with Mei, both playing against goats and playing with it, so yeah, this might be just enough of a change. This doesn't freeze the target faster or anything like that, it just increases damage, so it's a smaller change. It's quality of life, I'd say, more than anything, but it could have a significant impact in the right hands. It's really kind of hard to say with heroes like Mei, I think.
Do you want to cover Moira as well, because you read up on that a little bit with the heal and such?
Yeah, so the Moira changes are a bit confusing because it makes it sound like she does more healing from just healing a target with her primary fire, right? It's more about the passive around it. So the patch notes say that Biotic Grasp, the heal over time duration increased from 3 to 4 seconds, with the total healing increased from 50 to 65. So this is just the passive healing as the dev comments went over. This has no effect to you holding down left click or whatever the button is on console. It's more when you just give the target like a little bit of a puff. There is passive healing that they get that has been increased in duration and also the amount that it heals for. So makes Moira a little bit better being able to dyna dash between targets that need healing, as opposed to just holding left click on a tank and trying to keep them up.
Yeah, I think it's a good change, but it's not going to do too much. Another change that is kind of in the same category of a good change but not going to do too much is the Orisa one. The fusion driver, so the gun, movement speed penalty while firing reduced from 50% to 30%. And I, as a main tank player, definitely will feel that. If you played a lot of Orisa, you'll definitely feel that change. Even if you haven't read the patch notes, I think you'll notice it, but it's not going to be that huge of a deal. It's good though, and as the dev comment points out as well, it makes the whole thing of like putting your barrier forward and trying to push up with your team a bit more, a little bit easier, and makes a little bit more sense, but it's really not that big of a change at all. Pharah Rocket was also another one in the same type of category, but a bit interesting how it's related to the last patch as well, or well, a previous patch as well.
Exactly. We have Pharah's rocket launcher. The minimum explosive damage has been increased from 16.25 to 20. Doesn't increase the damage overall or anything like that. It's just the minimum damage that she can do because, of course, the further her weapon explodes from a target, less damage it does. So this just sort of fills up the bottom a little bit for Pharah, meaning that she does a little bit of damage if she's not accurate, Considering that Pharah has been played a lot more with goats and whatever else, just certain parts and maps that Pharah's really good on, this is just a nice change to make things a little bit more consistent. Of course, when the devs rebalanced the direct and explosive impact damage that Pharah did a couple of months ago now, it was clearly something that was overlooked, and it's nice to see that this has been changed. Pharah is in a good spot currently, this just makes it a little bit better.
Yeah, Soldier 76 as well got a very small buff on the gun here with damage increase from 19 to 20 per bullet on the pulse rifle. The sprint as well, the delay before you can fire the weapon after using sprint reduced from 0.5 to 0.3 seconds, so probably something that you kind of notice if you play a lot of Soldier, but not like a massive deal. But the tac visor can target Riptire and Immortality Field now, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't know about that until we were testing it last night, and yeah, we kind of found out, or I found out at least, and I think this makes sense, but it's not like a huge deal for Soldier overall. But like you mentioned before, and we both did, I guess, with the bunker style comms and the longer range being kind of incentivized away in the patch, it makes sense for Soldier to at least be played a little bit more because of that and this combined. So yeah, looking forward to playing Soldier now, I guess, but not a massive deal.
All long-range heroes, I think, have been buffed. Some much bigger than others. A lot of them have just been like minor things, but you can tell that Blizzard are very much trying to cater and tailor the game towards that, just a little bit more at least. But there is one hero that kind of goes against the grain a little bit. We could talk a full video about Sombra currently because of how she plays with, against goats, how it's going to be from now on, but this change isn't massively impactful. The cooldown is reduced by half with a hack when she hacks a health pack. So this is more in those situations of downtime where you do want to hack a health pack for yourself, for your team. It means that you don't need to wait like 2 to 3 seconds, whatever it is. Not to mention how Sombra interacts with the new hero, of course, being able to EMP and hack the immortality field. You can EMP the amplification matrix, you can't hack it though, however, so Sombra is really strong against Baptiste, and I imagine would be strong alongside too. Hacking targets, having everybody focusing from a distance. I really do think that we're going to have a bit of a Sombra meta on our hands. Not necessarily because of this change, but as I said, we could talk about that another day.
Torbjörn, one of the last heroes, I guess, on the list. Base health increased by 50 armor, 250 maximum health, so they just slapped another 50 armor on top of his normal health there, which I think is pretty solid. And then Overload, the ultimate, or well, not the ultimate, sorry, the ability that was previously, I guess, part of the Molten Core ultimate. The armor gain reduced from 150 to 100 there, so when you just use that ability, you won't be super tanky all of a sudden, and as we've seen, that ability has been pretty useful for the, well, quote-unquote new, I guess you could say, Torbjörn. So taking away the 50 armor from the Overload ability and adding that to the base health, I think makes sense. I don't know if it's gonna massively help out Torbjörn, but I'm sure the friend will be happy at least. So
he's going to play it regardless, isn't he, really? Let's see.
Yeah. Oh, Widowmaker as well, speaking of which, Infrasight. Yeah, we did mention that before, but I'm very happy to just see these changes that Blizzard kind of go away from, oh, we're just going to address what was a problem in the previous patch and then create a new problem, to instead, oh, we're going to shift the meta in this type of way. I think that's a really good mentality to have. I like to see that a lot in MOBAs, when MOBAs get patches to try and shift the meta a bit, and this really kind of is that, so... Yeah, good stuff. Wrecking Ball, I guess it's the final one.
Yeah, and I really like this change. It's quality of life, but as such, I know a lot of these changes are very much quality of life, but this is the biggest impact. I can imagine players like Arming for the Chengdu Hunters, and of course Yeatle will be screaming in joy when they hear that Adaptive Shields no longer cancels roll mode. So if you're in ball mode and you use Adaptive Shields beforehand, you would be taken out of it. So if you're in the middle of the enemy team, you would be like, hey, surprise, and then immediately get, battered by them, right? But now you can use the Adaptive Shield and stay in ball mode. So this is really good if you want to keep around, keep surviving. It means that you don't need to quickly go out and in into ball mode. So I really like this change. I think it's huge for Wrecking Ball, who, again, is a hero that's becoming much more popular at the moment. And I'm really happy to see it. Eventually, we got there.
I'm pretty scared, honestly. Like, Wrecking Ball is scary. Like, with the buffs that have happened over time, the sort of increased damage versus armor against headshots when that was changed a couple patches ago, and just in general, like, Wrecking Ball is definitely played more and more. I mean, if I'm up against a good Wrecking Ball, like, that's scary for sure. Like, it's just a good hero. It's a really good hero. All right, that is basically it for the patch. We got some bug fixes and some other just minor things here and there. But that is about it for this entire patch. If you want to sum it up real quick, what would you say is the main takeaway from it in just a couple sentences?
The best balance patch that we've had for a while, with the addition of a new hero that is going to complement certain playstyles, that isn't going to break the meta in inverted commas like Brigitte did. I think Blizzard learned their lesson there. They're rather just good heroes and just tailoring the game to compensate for them a lot more, as opposed to, we hate dive, let's add in a hero that's very anti-dive. They're not doing that with goats. Instead of nerfing goats more, they're buffing everything else, which is really, really good, and I'm glad that Blizzard are going along that route.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's more of a, I guess you could say, sophisticated way to work against a meta that's been around for a long time, whilst still, you know, introducing tools for everyone, really. But yeah, I like to focus on long range too. It's just, I feel like adding Baptiste along with all this long range stuff will make for a really interesting viewing experience for Overwatch League as well, because instead of it being these big two groups of heroes just running at each other, you've got, you know, a little bit more options, and you got the option to also see more plays happen, like say Baptiste throwing out his immortality field onto Widowmaker, and that clutch saves her from being headshot by the other Widowmaker, and bam, all of a sudden you got a really sick saving play that helps out and promotes sort of long range and sniper plays as well, which is always cool to watch. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing it on the live client when that happens. For now, I guess we're just gonna get back to more testing and seeing what Baptiste is like, but that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and yeah,
bye.
We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.